The Cup of Tea, a Portuguese story. All this happened, as you will see, before the railway from Oporto to Regova had been completed and when travelers had to travel part of the way by a stagecoach. The stagecoach, drawn by six strong horses, was waiting outside the coach station in Oporto. It was time for it to be setting out. A noisy crowd was gathered round it. Friends were saying a last goodbye. Passengers were shouting that they could not get the seats that they had booked, and some were screaming that they could not see their luggage. Porters were trying to push their way through the crowd, swearing and cursing as they pushed. A young man sat quietly in the coach in the seat nearest the door. He had taken his seat early and had seen his luggage safely placed on the roof of the coach. And now the other places were filled except for the one opposite him. It seemed that this passenger was not going to arrive in time. The driver climbed to his seat, the guard blew his horn, and the coach was just going to start when a strange sight came round the corner. This was a fat man who was trying hard to hurry but only succeeding in walking like a duck. He was waving an enormous umbrella and shouting hoarsely to attract the attention of the driver. He was followed by two porters loaded with his luggage. The guard swore at him, and so did the porters as they lifted up his heavy luggage. The fat passenger, breathing hard, climbed into the empty seat and, with some difficulty, found room for his umbrella and his enormous cloak. The coach went rattling down the stony streets of Oporto towards the railway station. The fat passenger was very restless and uneasy. He simply could not sit still and kept on muttering something. At last, he caught the eye of the quiet young man opposite him, Jaco de Souza. "It is too hard," he said. "Just think, I could not get my cup of tea." "Oh, I see. You see, it is like this. I always drink a cup of strong black tea after my lunch, always. And now I was in such a hurry that I had no time for it. I can't tell you how I miss it. You see, young man, at my age, habits are very important to a man. It is really dreadful when you have to break them. I know that I am going to feel miserable all the way just because I couldn't get my cup of tea. You are young, but let me give you a bit of advice. When once you have formed a good habit, let nothing put you off it." D'Souza was amused, but his face showed only sympathy for his fellow traveler in distress, and he said helpfully, "We will soon be at the railway station, sir, and you will be able to get a cup of tea in the refreshment room." The fat passenger brightened. "Of course I shall," he said. I hadn't thought of that. It will be a bit late after my lunch, but never mind. When the coach reached the railway station, the train was already at the platform. The passengers rushed into the refreshment room to prepare themselves for the train journey. Some drank a glass of wine and ate bread and fruit. Others bought something to eat in the train. The fat man sat down at a table and looked round for a waiter. But the waiters were few and all of them were very busy. The fat man called and called, but it was some time before he could get a waiter to notice him. He succeeded in the end, and when D'Souza was leaving to take his seat on the train, he saw the fat passenger with a cup of tea in front of him. Very soon afterwards, the fat man ran out of the refreshment room and climbed into the train just as the whistle sounded. He sat down heavily in front of D'Souza and wiped his face with a large silk handkerchief. Well, the quiet young man said with a smile, "My dear boy, can you believe it? That waiter brought me green tea. I can never drink green tea." The sun was now setting and its last rays fell on a very beautiful scene, majestic mountains, streams, and villages. In all this, the fat passenger could see no beauty at all. He kept on yawning and muttering something. D'Souza caught the word tea. "You can soon have your cup of tea," said D'Souza. "Where?" the fat passenger asked eagerly. "At Cahaid. We have to leave the train there and take another coach." "So we do. I had forgotten that. It is good of you to remind me. I can get a cup of tea at the inn where the coach starts." The fat passenger began to hum a song cheerfully. Then he fell asleep and did not wake up until D'Souza gave him a little shake. "What is it? Where are we?" "We are at Cahaid and we have to get out here." "Oh, thank you. It's very kind of you," the fat man said, getting up and gathering his belongings. Two stagecoaches were standing outside the inn, one for Roga and the other for Villarreal. When D'Souza passed by on his way to the coach for Roga, he found the fat man sitting at a table outside the restaurant. He was having a fierce argument with a waiter. The young man stopped and asked his fellow passenger, "Are you going to Roga or to Villarreal, sir?" "Roga." "Can you believe it? A most terrible thing. I simply cannot get a cup of tea." "That is a very serious matter," the young man said with a very serious face. "Serious? I should think it is. What sort of restaurant is this? There is not a leaf of tea in the place." "Will all passengers for Roga take their seats in the coach, please?" the guard called out. In the coach, the fat passenger again sat opposite D'Souza. "So you have been disappointed again, sir?" "Don't talk about it. It is too dreadful. What a journey to make without a cup of tea." "But you will have another chance at Amaranta. We have to stop there to change the horses." "I am glad to hear that. It is very good of you, my dear young man." The coach rattled down the country roads. Most of the passengers fell asleep, but D'Souza stayed awake, enchanted by the magic of the moonlight shining over the lovely countryside. They crossed the ancient bridge of Amaranta and drew up outside its famous old inn. The dining room of the inn was full of tobacco smoke and the smell of chocolate. The waiter came forward to show the travelers to their seats and brought them an excellent supper. D'Souza thoroughly enjoyed it. He looked round and saw the fat man sitting at the corner of the table, doing all he could to attract the attention of the waiter. Waiter, please, waiter, will you bring me a cup of tea? Strong black tea? It must be strong and black, remember. Yes, sir, certainly, sir. But I have to serve the supper first. What will you have for your supper, sir? I can't eat anything until I have had a cup of tea. The waiter went on serving large plates of delicious food. The company grew quite merry, and some of the passengers from the coach began to sing. And in the midst of all this feasting and merriment, the fat passenger sat with a dismal face, eating nothing and waiting patiently for his cup of tea. Then someone shouted that the coach was leaving in 5 minutes, and instantly there was a lot of excitement and confusion. Everyone rushed to take his seat in the coach, and D'Souza heard the fat passenger saying to the waiter in despairing tone, "And my tea? Waiter, what about my cup of tea?" "Coming, sir," said the waiter. All the passengers except the fat man were now seated in the coach. A strong team of 12 oxen, gay with red caps and brass bells, was attached to the coach because the road now led up to steep mountainside. The guard shouted to the fat passenger, "Take your seat, sir, I can't wait any longer." Suddenly, the waiter came running with a steaming cup of tea on a tray. The fat passenger had one foot on the step of the coach, but he stopped, gave a cry of joy, and lifted the cup to his eager lips. The next moment, he cried out in pain and put the cup back on the tray. "It's boiling hot," he complained. "How can I drink it? Why did you bring it like that just as the coach was starting?" He climbed into his seat opposite D'Souza, and the young man saw tears of pain and disappointment in his eyes. For the next 5 hours, the stagecoach climbed slowly up the mountainside, pulled by the slow but powerful oxen. A fine rain fell on the huge old trees at the roadside, and the wind bent their branches. Here and there, narrow streams ran swiftly down from the snowy mountain top to join the mighty river Dororo. The driver walked beside the leader of the team and now and then gave an encouraging shout to the oxen. All the passengers except the quiet young man were asleep. His eyes were wide open and he was filled with wonder at the sight of so much wild beauty. He was watching the sunrise, bathing the mountains in many colors, purple, pink, and yellow, when the coach drew up in front of an inn near the village of Quintella. There, all the passengers who happened to be awake got out to stretch their legs and to breathe in the pure mountain air. D'Souza walked along, enchanted by the scenery. Peak after peak rose up majestically as far as his eyes could see, and lower down a small lake was gleaming in the first rays of the sun. He gasped with delight. It was then that he heard slow and heavy footsteps at the back of him, and then a long yawn sounded close to his ear. It was the fat passenger, still half asleep. Well, sir, how are you feeling? What about your tea? Did you manage to get a cup at the inn? My dear young friend, I have lost all hope. I asked at that miserable inn, but they have no tea at all. They say that nobody ever asks for it. He gave a heavy sigh and said mournfully, "Ah, well." The team of oxen was now detached from the coach and replaced by 6 strong horses. The guard blew his horn and the coach started off. They went fast down the mountainside, and it was now long before they reached the orchards and then the vineyards on the banks of River Douro. They drove for many miles beside that great river until the houses grew more frequent and gardens appeared. At last, they entered the stony streets of Ryoga. It was 8:30 in the morning and the right time for breakfast. The coach drew up in front of the hotel, a large white building with green shutters. The fat passenger turned to the quiet young man and said with a smile, "Thank you, my dear young friend, for your kindness. If you hadn't been there, I should have had a terrible journey. I cannot tell you how I have suffered from not having my cup of tea before I left. When a man gets to my age, it's wrong for him to give up a habit. Take my advice, my young friend, and never give up a habit that you have formed, if it is a good one, of course." He paused, and a look of delight spread over his broad face. Then he went on, "Now, at last, I am going to get my cup of tea. It is late, it is true, but better late than never. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Bernard Bay, and I am on my way to Doroso on business. I hope we shall meet again. In any case, I wish you a safe journey and good luck. And now, my dear friend, I am going to drink to your good health a cup of tea. Thank you."